which includes which includes but not limited to AML audit to assess the effectiveness of your AML program and to provide recommendations when necessary. Also to AML trainings, both company-wide and specialized. And also we help organizations build their AML programs. We also provide legal advisory services, business advisory. And also when you think of business expansions to other jurisdictions, through license procurement or possible partnerships, Regcompass is your go-to firm for all of that. So welcome again, everyone, for joining. Thank you so much. And thank you to our amazing speakers who I'll be introducing very, very shortly. Okay, thank you everyone for joining. Please, if you are just joining us, kindly use the QR code in the chat box or the link just for us to know where you are joining us from. Okay, so I'll be introducing our speakers right now. And we have our amazing speakers here on the call. So first on the call, firstly, I'll be introducing Dr. Tunde Ibidapo-Obey. So Dr. Tunde Ibidapo-Obey is the CEO and co-founder of RegFile Solutions, an AI-powered AML fraud prevention and regulatory compliance platform that seeks to transform financial crime compliance in Africa. Dr. Tunde Ibidapo-Obey is qualified to practice both in Nigeria, Ontario, in Canada, and is also a solicitor in England and Wales. And he has over 16 years experience in this multiple jurisdictions. Dr. Tunde Ibidapo-Obey is also a certified AML laundry specialist and has worked in heavily regulated industries like banking, pharmaceutical, and governments in Nigeria, in the UK, and also in the North America. And from the name, you hear Dr. Tunde Ibidapo-Obey. Dr. Tunde Ibidapo-Obey also holds a PhD and has extensive expertise in regulatory technology, and he has worked closely with financial institutions. Thank you so much, Dr. Tunde Ibidapo-Obey, for joining us today. And do you have any words to add, sir? And I hope it's okay to call you Doc.
No, I mean, you can just call me Tunde. It's fine. I'm
right.
just to thank the team for the invite. I'm happy to be here. Looking forward to the conversation. I've had some technical challenges this morning. I hope it's all resolved. But yeah, happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Sorry about the challenges or the challenge you faced in joining. Okay, so I'll be introducing our second speaker, Oluwakorede Rotimi. Oluwakorede Rotimi is a seasoned compliance professional with nearly a decade of valuable experience in navigating complex, effective compliance and risk management programs across different regions. And Oluwakorede Rotimi has expertise in anti-corruption, AML fraud, and various compliance frameworks. And she also holds relevant qualifications, including but not limited to CFCS, CAMS, and the rest. Thank you so much, Oluwakorede Rotimi, for joining us today. Do you have any words to add?
Okay, I was unable to mute myself. I'm happy to be here. Thank you very much for the introduction.
Thank you. And lastly, we have Kehinde Bamidele, who is a governance, risk, and compliance professional with proven track record of integrating solutions, technology to streamline compliance processes, enhance client onboarding, optimize transaction monitoring, and the rest. Welcome, Kehinde Bamidele. Do you have any words to add?
Thank you so much, Yano. Looking forward to this section and contributing, and sharing insights with the co-speakers.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. So to get right into it, today we have a roundtable on discussing basically on a practical guide to policy implementation and monitoring using RegTech solutions. And well, to start with, I'll be directing this question to Dr. Tunde. Okay, it says it's fine to call him Tunde. So I've directed the question to Tunde. Do you want to tell us what policy implementation and monitoring entails in an organization?
Okay,
Hi,
thanks so
Tunde, if
much.
you're speaking, you're
Yeah,
okay.
I keep being asked for permission to unmute myself. So yeah, thank you so much. So the question, just to take it, so the question is, what does policy implementation entail?
Yes. What
Okay.
does policy implementation and monitoring entail in an organization?
Yeah, so I think I will take that from the way I see it, that comes at on basically two levels. A lot of thankfully, when internal compliance teams are trying to implement policies, there's some direction because there's the broader regulatory direction that's been given. So there's the broader regulatory implementation, broader regulatory requirements, and then there's now the internal requirements based on your organization. And so from the perspective of, okay, say for instance, you want to implement a policy, and I'll make it as simple as possible. So you want to implement a policy around politically exposed persons. Your policy, the regulation suggests that already tells you that if you're onboarding a customer who is a politically exposed person, there's a process that you have to follow. You have to get internal approval. You have to do extended due diligence, and then you have to basically then monitor that person specifically with a higher risk. That is something that you don't have any flexibility around. The law has said you must do that. So the way that you would use, I guess you would do that, you would kind of incorporate that into your policies, that you get clear guidance to your employees around this process that the law has laid out. Now, within your organization, with the same structure, you can have an internal policy on how the approach that you take to how you would kind of execute that broader regulatory mandate. And so you have a situation where you can say that within Tunde finance company, this is the process that we follow. If it is a compliance officer, then they have to escalate to a compliance manager, who then has to escalate to X person and Y person. And so the way that and this conversation is around RegTech. A lot of these things, when you do it manually, they can be done manually. But what RegTech does is it helps you to be able to do it at scale. It goes beyond just doing it for 10 or 20 people. Is when you have an organization doing 100,000, 10,000 people constantly. So the way that you kind of incorporate RegTech into that kind of structure is you would effectively set the parameters. And I'm sorry, this isn't me marketing, but I'll give an example like with our platform RegFile. What we do is we give our customers the ability to set the parameters on when it comes to like risk rating your customers. So you have done the work, the team have done the work internally initially to say, if a customer comes in that meets this criteria, and you do the painstaking work of setting out what that criteria is. If that customer is a PEP, if that customer is a student who is whatever criteria that you want to put, you do the work to set that out in the structure in the solution, so that every time a new customer comes, you don't have the individual compliance manager or compliance officer having to basically rehash that process on a one-on-one basis. You just go at scale, everything just flows to the system. So to your question, how do you implement it? And I guess that's the critical question. Firstly, you have to think about the structure, whether and what is driving it. Is it a legal requirement or is it an internal process requirement? You have to think about that structure. Then you have to think about the exceptions. Are there certain exceptions that you'd want to include within that structure? And then you have to think, okay, what is the practical applicability of it on a day-to-day basis? And then how do you monitor it? And how do you monitor it, and how do you maintain the efficiency? So if you're implementing a RegTech solution around that, those parameters, you have to make sure that you're able to tick all those boxes. Number one, where it comes from, what is driving it? Number two, how do you set it up on a practical basis on one by one? And then also, how do you monitor the effectiveness? And then number four, how do you then kind of see trends and analysis? So that is the approach that I would be taking in implementing any compliance solution with respect to whether it's internal policy or external policy driven by the regulations.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Tunde. I have a follow-up question, but I will come back to that. Oluwakorede, do you have anything to add or a different opinion from Doc's opinion? Kehinde, do you have anything to add as well? All right, thank you. Just to mention, okay, go ahead, please.
No, please.
All right, sorry. Thank you. Okay, so just to mention, I know that when the flyer went out, the moderator was supposed to be Rama Ibiyeye, who is the managing partner at Regcompass Consults. I want to apologize that due to unforeseen circumstances, she's unavoidably absent today, so I will be the moderator for the roundtable today. Thank you all. And also, if you have any questions or comments, please use the chat box. Just drop your questions in the chat box. And when we get to the dedicated segment for questions, we'll take all the questions. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Hi, yeah.
All
Sorry.
Hi.
I just wanted to say that I had something to add to Dr. Today's comment, but I was unable to
Unmute.
mute. But I think I'll just stay unmuted just so I don't have to
Yeah.
information. No worries. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so before I go back to Ms. Dr. Tsunde, Korede, I'll be directing this question to you. So what are the key challenges that organizations face when translating policies into operational practice?
Sure. I mean, that one is it's one of my favorite topics because no one reads policies. I'm sorry to say. Okay, I'm not actually sorry to say, but no one actually reads policies, and I say this, based on experience of having to translate policies into operational practice. So one of the challenges that I've seen in policy implementation is, or policy operationalization in that sense, is, I would say, communication gaps. And I say this because there are different, when you set up a policy, so take, for example, an AML policy or a data protection policy, the expectation is that it's like a high level, it's meant to be a high level document. It's like a living document, but it's high level. So there is the what, there is the why of the policy. It might be clear, but just because policies are written in technical legalese, call it legalese, it makes it difficult for people that the policy applies to understand it and also be able to apply it. So that gap, I would say, is one of the key challenges. And I would also say perhaps siloed operations, or maybe lack of awareness, just because a policy might be owned by a particular department, say IT or compliance, for instance, but other people, and then it applies to the entire company. But like other people don't know what is expected of them, of their roles. So there is a disconnect where the policies then become impractical, and then there are significant operational bottlenecks. So in that case, I would say another challenge is resistance to change. People don't like, I don't know, and I say people generally, but generally when things change, when policies change, it requires change in behaviors, or change in activity, change in workflows. And so employees tend to, or at least people, let me say people in this case, tend to resist those changes because they don't understand the purpose of, even if they understand it, just the fact that it doesn't apply to them, or it doesn't impact their employment, for instance, or they sometimes see it as a barrier to productivity. Hey, why do we need to do this? Why should, for instance, why do we need to ask for customers proof of address? And that is sensitive information, and you having to explain that to the business team. So yeah, I would say that people are generally resistant to change. And I guess the last one is inadequate, I would say, awareness and training. You don't just roll out policies just because you want to fulfill a regulatory requirement. You roll it out because you want it to be applicable. You want to, so when you roll out policies, the difficulty comes in also dedicating enough resources, and also creating awareness, having like the right, what's the word? Yeah, resources to implement those policies. Those are some of the challenges that I believe that impact the turning policy into practical activities. Yeah.
Thank you, Korede. Thank you. Kehinde, do you have anything to add to what Korede has said, or you have a different opinion?
I think Coretta has mentioned some of the example, like reasons why policy implementation the challenges compliance officers, companies face with implementing policies. And a very good thing, the first thing she said was about people do not read policies. We have so many policies that has not been read, by a lot of people in the organization, and that is the truth. But and now the solution to that could be, awareness, not just training. It would be sending out just a short email to say, do you know we have this policy? Or do you know, for example, if, it is a policy that has to do with banking or the settlement team, you could send out an email to list out the things, just a short email to list out the things they should be aware of. If it is a policy, to the compliance team about deadlines, meeting regulatory deadlines. So I would say that, yes, policy awareness is very important, like not just drafting the policies. And again, change management. I would say that that is a very big problem with implementing policies. When there is a new policy, you can't just jump into implementing it. You can't say, oh, there is a new policy now, so everybody, just implement it. Send emails to say, blah, this, that. You have to sit down and think about how do you implement it. If it is going to, what level of impact does it have on the organization? Would it be, is it so critical that it will change the process? If it is not so critical, if it is just something you could, if, for example, we have voluntary disclosures, or that is not mandatory, then that is simpler to implement. But if we have processes that would impact, that people would need to go for training, that would people need to actually work on and do, then, compliance professionals, MLROs need to sit down and think about, how do I implement this change? How does this change affect the organization? How does then the team, the culture of the company, is it a company that people would not come for training, or people would not click the training link? So maybe the best way to do it would be a live training. Everybody comes to the office for this policy, and there was a there was a video or going on social media about, when you're reading the training materials, and at the end it gets to answering questions, you have to click, you have to go back to read it, so that is quite innovative, because we actually click to the end, and at the end of the day, you now have to go back because there is a question you have to answer, and there is a particular, you have to score, you have to get a particular score to pass through it. So I would say change management is very important in implementing policy. So compliance professionals, before you implement a policy, you still have to look at, how do I implement this policy? What is the best way to implement the policy? And aside, managing change, another challenge is, I would say, policy review. Not just open the policy next year and see if there is a if there is a reason why a policy is not being implemented, is not working. There should be a review of the reason why people are not implementing. They may understand. They may not just see the reason why they may not think it is important. They may think it is not business minded, for example, asking clients for thousands and thousands of information and documents. So a good way would be to also look at, why is this policy not being implemented? Not just a fire brigade approach to just say, oh, you're not implementing this policy, you have to implement it within 2-3 days,
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kehinde. Thank you. I agree with Korede on the fact that people do not read, and then that's a very big challenge, because you just keep drafting policies, and like Kende mentioned, you just send emails and then people just leave it in the email as sent. And I saw Dr. Cindy was nodding and smiling. So do you think there's a place where these RegTech solutions can solve all of these challenges that people do not read, people are opposed to change, and there's lack of independent awareness or training? Is there a place where these RegTech solutions can bridge this gap or solve these challenges?
I mean, I was nodding, I was smiling because I agree with what my co-speakers have said. Really, around people don't read. I think for me, yes, there is. There are solutions and different use cases that can solve those specific challenges. The underlying problem, however, is if you have, so what technology does. I mean, back when, I mean, I'm dating myself a bit, but back when we were learning computer in school, they used to teach us garbage in, garbage out. So basically, you have a situation where technology basically accelerates or it accelerates whatever it is that you're doing. It doesn't necessarily solve bad behavior. If you have good behavior, it makes good behavior, accelerates good behavior. If you have bad behavior, unfortunately, it accelerates bad behavior. So RegTech can't necessarily fix those things if those people do not have the willingness to be able to apply themselves. For instance, if you have a good compliance officer who or a member of the organization who are very good at reading policy, but the challenge is that the speed at which the policies are changing is difficult for them to keep up. Then technology can come in and say, okay, we can help you streamline that process. But if you have someone that doesn't even read it at all, then you have a situation where you're not able to track. So, I mean, there's different use cases that RegTech can potentially solve and step in. I can give an example for, once again, this is not a plug for RegFile, but I can give an example where we have certain we have a feature where you have the organization has the ability to tag policy documents. And also within the organization, you have responsible individuals who must number one, are responsible for updating the documents when it's due for renewal. But also with the use of AI, we've been able to do interesting things around expandability around the expectations around the document, because a lot of these policy documents, unfortunately, sometimes might be a bit verbose. And so around kind of streamlining what is expected and specific steps on what individuals should do, and then tracking that performance. So it is unique to each organization. So to answer your question, Yanulua, yes, that the RegTech can really support use cases, but it can't really solve bad behavior. And so you have are able to drive correct behavior.
Yeah,
It happens to
thank
all of us.
you.
Happens to all of us.
Actually, at the point you need to apply yourself, you need to read.
Yep.
So yeah, so RegTech solutions won't take out the human factor or you applying yourself. Thank you, thank you. Okay, so I'll be directing my next question to Korede. So how do you think we can keep policies relevant as business grows or as regulations change? And what are possible signs that may that a system or process, what are the possible signs that a system or process is redundant or slowing the business down? Should I take that again? You're muted if you're speaking.
Someone, sorry, I got unmuted again. Okay, so I'm sorry. To your question, how do you keep policies relevant in an organization as the
Yeah,
of
business
course
growth
evolving
and
changes? Okay,
change.
great. Okay, so first of all, I wouldn't say that this is possible manually. First, because you don't see policies as a what's the word, as a static document. You see it as a the dynamic living system that you know it basically needs to be treated that way. So in order to keep policies relevant for the business or as evolving changes come, I would say that one should have a life cycle management process,
Mm.
like Dr. Today mentioned earlier. There are people who are responsible for, you know, uh, there are people who are responsible for keeping policies updated on a periodic basis. So, for instance, if something comes out from the central bank today or the SEC, then someone has to be responsible for making sure that the policy you have covers that, or at least gets updated to reflect, the new regulations or whatever. So I would say regular reviews, stakeholder management. Again, just because you wrote a policy or you're the owner of a policy does not mean there aren't other stakeholders that should be involved, like the board of directors. Like ideally, every policy has a governance structure. So someone has to approve that policy, even if you wrote it. Some people, a couple of people have to implement it. For instance, if the government comes today and says, oh, every financial institution has to now collect grandmother's date of birth or grandmother's death certificates, not to be insensitive, but what that means is there are other people that would have to be involved in that policy implementation. There is IT, for instance, who would have to support that policy implementation. So yes, schedule regular policy reviews. I know that the general rule, or at least the general guideline, is to review policies every year on an
Yeah.
annual basis. But in a high risk industry or a rapidly changing area, there has to be more frequent interim reviews. Just because you have to be able to also proactively identify any gaps before they become a problem, or before the regulator comes knocking, or even an auditor comes
Yeah.
knocking to say, what's going on? Do you have this policy? What have you done about, this guideline that was released like yesterday night? You also have to be able to, beyond just having a team, you have to stay updated. So there are a lot of, I think I have read a couple of articles from Regfill and a couple other, RegTech solutions, or even law firms who have put out newsletters, both on LinkedIn, everywhere really. So to help you stay ahead of new requirements. So any policy owner has to stay ahead of news. So you have to go there. If you have to go there every day, go there. There are also, by the way, regulatory intelligence tools that help you to stay updated of any new policy changes or announcements or whatever, that help you for smoother transition of that. And I would say also use technology to your advantage. And I say this because you can hardly do anything without, you can't use I'm sorry, but you can't use Excel sheets to monitor your policies, because like nothing happens. Someone has to go in there manually and review it. Use technology, try to centralize things, try to also maintain version control, use automated reminders so that you bear in mind that, oh, a policy review is coming up, or a training deadline or something, and also audit trail. Make sure that if you're changing even a letter in a policy, okay, maybe not a letter, but I'm sure you understand. If you're changing something, it may be a significant portion in a policy, you have to get the right approvals for auditability. So that's my contribution.
Thank you. Thank you, Korede. Kind, did you have anything to add?
No, Corredi has
All right.
covered.
Thank you. Doc, do you think there's a place, there's this argument on X that AI will soon take all our jobs and all of that. And so my question would be that, do you think there's a place in the future where you think we'll not need the human factor again, and then we just have RegTech solutions doing everything, and then we just sit back on our chair and relax? Do you think there's
Um,
that in the future?
but what I'll say, number one, I don't go on X again since Elon took over. I don't go on X again. But yes, I think so. I think there's two parts. Of my personal opinion, no, I don't think there's a future where specifically for the nature of what we do that there won't be the requirement for humans. I personally don't believe that is going to be the case. What I do believe is going to be the case is that there will be less reliance on humans for the things that are repeatable tasks. And I think we're already seeing it. We're already seeing it. The good, so there's my opinion, and there's what the kind of the policies are. And I'll give an example. So the Nigerian Data Protection Act and the General Application Implementation Directive talks about and I use when about automation decisioning. And when it comes to the rights of individuals with respect to their financial products and likes. you have a situation where the law is saying that you can't actually, that you must have a human being involved in that decision. And so and this is a new law. So you already have a situation where the law is kind of putting safeguards around what we as individuals want to try to automate fully. So there's that perspective where on a policy level, the direction is that there will always be individuals that are involved in that process. On the level of from a technology level as well, I believe, and from what we see, is that when you have humans involved, it actually is more efficient. It is more efficient because you're able to. So and I'll speak about AI for instance, for this to answer this question. AI is only as good. AI on its own is probably a very, very useless tool on its own. AI is only as good as the data sources, the data that it's and as it improves. So if you give AI bad data or incomplete data or incorrect data, it will give you incomplete or incorrect information. And so the AI doesn't know that it's doing that because it's just working off the information that it has. And so when you have human beings that are able to take on different contexts, take on different data sources that are outside of the direct flow of information that is going into the AI, you're able to get a more well-rounded decision that is a more well-rounded decision. So yeah, so I personally do not believe that we're going to get to a point where humans are totally irrelevant again. Irrelevant, but I think that we'll start to see effectiveness and efficiency-driven technology tools. Just to wrap up, I'll give examples of situations where we're seeing efficiency in and we're seeing less of a reliance on human beings. Once again, this is me not plugging anything, but one of the challenges, if you are a financial institution, one of the obligations that you have is to submit what's called a suspicious transaction report. If you've identified activity that is suspicious, your obligation is to report that. Now, what would happen if your system, if you have a transaction monitoring tool or not, if you flag something that is suspicious, what the obligation of the compliance officer or the compliance analyst is to do, or the fraud analyst is to do, is to look at contextual information. Okay, this transaction happened. Let me look at the past history of the customer. Let me see who they are trying to transact to, and then create a report. That report, you send it to your supervisor, that person then approves, and then you then submit that report to the NFIU through the GoML platform. Now, that is a system that might have taken, maybe if you do it properly, maybe it'll take you 3 to 4 hours if you do it properly. Now, what AI is able to do and what to help with the efficiency is that the transaction has been flagged. The AI understands the transaction patterns, the previous transaction patterns of the customer. It understands the contextual data around location and all of those things. And it can, as a first source, provide to you a report that says, based on the information and the indicators and all the stuff that I have, this is what I think you should be submitting to the NFIU. The NFIU has what it calls indicators. So I think there's about 327 different indicators that when you're submitting to the GoML platform, you have to choose from. The AI can tell you, okay, based on what this context is, and based on what we think you should be submitting, this is the most relevant indicator. The AI can also then say, this is a summary of what you think you should be submitting. So that kind of contextual information, all of that stuff, that data gathering process that would have taken 3 hours before is being able to cut it down to maybe 10 seconds. Now, you as an individual still have the obligation to then review that and see whether or not you agree with it before you submit. So that human in the loop is still very, very important. But what AI has been able to do is do a lot of heavy lifting around the expectations of what you should be submitting. So you would always have to see that, but AI will just help to make that load a bit lighter for you. So that's an example of where we see that AI is still is helpful, but the human is still relevant and will continue to be relevant in context of compliance.
Thank you, Dr. Tunde. So it's important to note that the human factor cannot be completely eliminated or eroded in policy implementation and monitoring. Thank you so much. Kehinde, I'll be directing my next question to you. So how do you think we can measure effectiveness of a policy that that is already implemented in an organization, either through a RegTech platform?
Yes, so okay, yeah. I would like to say that first thing is, if you are using, most platforms would actually measure those um would actually measure those implementation, like everything you need to measure. For example, if you are screening, you have your data there that you could download. When you screened, your ongoing screening, you could fix the frequency for your, you could schedule screening for ID reminders, expiration of identification document. You could schedule it, and once it's sent, you would be able to download the report or the audit trail for that purpose. So yes, most RegTech tools comes with that function. But another, aside the RegTech tools, it is our responsibility as professionals to keep those reports and to monitor implementation, which is why, like Korede said, we have to have dedicated people on, for the policy life cycle. When we have, if we are supposed to send and reporting, which comes to compliance governance, so, which is making sure that the board of directors are involved in the compliance policy, in the compliance overview, everything in the compliance department. So in monitoring implementation, we have to have a report. You need to be writing your report. It could be monthly, it could be quarterly, biannually, yearly. And this report should be going to the board of directors. So it is very important. So they are aware of what is happening in the compliance department, and they would also be able to buy into what's into the compliance workflow and everything that needs to be done. It would not just be seen as a cost or something that is not so relevant, because they would see the work that is done. So it is very important. And it also it also shows how, would I say, profitability, or how relevant the compliance department is when we send reports out. So it is very important that in monitoring policies, we draft reports. Then RegTech tools, like I said, usually comes with reports. You could download those reports. Yeah, so I would say those two things: manually writing reports, quarterly, or some reports have to go out monthly anyways. So depending on what the process or the policies in the company, I would say that, or in the organization, you have to write your policies, your reports is very important, and have them sent to the board every quarter. That would be a good way to start. Then if for startups or companies that are still in the early stages and would not want to, and have not started implementing policies, you could still use the Excel sheet. You could have your control logs, your for to track those. However, it is not sustainable when you grow. You would have to change, or when the business grows larger, you would have to move to a RegTech solution. And some of these solutions or tools are free. Some of them are free.
Okay. Thank you. Thank
You
you,
don't have to,
Kaylee.
you know, you don't have to buy them or pay for them, or you have free period. So yes, reports, RegTech tools, your Excel sheets while you.
Okay, so thank you, Kayinde. Thank you. So I have a follow-up question on that. So do you think RegTech solutions can help to flag non-compliance or policy breaches in an organization?
Definitely, it could. It can. Yes, it can help. So if you have because you would have scheduled when your reports should go out. For example, if you have like a job function management tool that has I think we have like Asana, Trello, and the likes for that. So if you have like a report that should go out, if it is a weekly report, for example, your electronic transactions reports, or your cash transactions report, or suspicious transactions report. If the timeline is, if it is daily reports, if it is not sent daily, it would flag it immediately when it is. You could set reminders, or remind this person by a week to the event. You could even use your Google Calendar, for that purpose. It would flag, it would send you a reminder to, you need to send your report, or this report is due by so time. It sends it to the whole team, so everybody knows who is responsible for that. So you could use your
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kendi. So there's also the part that all of us need to be woke and not be backwards, because we have different technology tools that we can use and to also implement these policies, and also to just help us stay updated and all of that. And okay, the next question is open to any of our speakers. So we understand that policy implementation and monitoring are all part of compliance. So how do we demonstrate to investors that compliance spend is not just that we're just spending, or it's just costs, but then compliance spend delivers value? So how can we demonstrate to investors that we're not just spending money, we don't just feel like spending money, but then it's just for the purpose of delivering value?
I don't know if I could go first, just because this one is very dear to me. But I wanted to add a comment to Dr. Today's.
Sure, please go ahead.
I would say it's just an inside joke, but the only future, or the only universe where RegTech where artificial intelligence would replace humans would be if the entire ecosystem is made of artificial intelligence. So the people, the customers are AI, the regulators are AI, the staff members are AI. I think that's the only future I see, and that's not a future that would happen. But to answer your question about, how to sell compliance as a strategic business decision rather than a cost, right? That's yes. First of all, I would say that speak data. You don't just go to stakeholders in this case, investors, senior management board, whatever. You don't just go to them with a solution and say, hey guys, we have this solution. We found this RegTech solution is nice. Let's implement it. This is how much it's going to cost. I think what you have to go with a business problem. You have to go with a business problem. Sell the idea. Become a persuader if you have to be a salesperson. Talk about the financial impact. Talk about the financial benefit. Talk about, even if you feel like the ROI is not coming in terms, it's not going to be measured in terms of profit. Talk about what's the reduction in potential fines or sanctions. Talk about the reputational image, protection of your image. Talk about how it reduces exposure to unnecessary, because the truth is, if you as an organization get exposed to regulatory sanctions, it could impact your reputation. If you get exposed to significant amount of fraud, we've seen it time and time again, it could be, such a big deal. So you have to present a solid business case with data, enough data, and then also present like a make or buy analysis. For instance, if you've already decided to, this RegTech tool is amazing, but we have internal resources to build it. Like, you have to think about why, more or less like weigh options. And I think the last one is expect questions. People would ask you questions. By people, I mean stakeholders. They will ask you questions. They will ask you questions about ROI. They will ask you questions about the integration plan on a high level, of course. They will probably ask you questions about what risks it poses by, outsourcing the compliance solution. And of course, you also have to get the right people on board. So not just approaching, I'm sorry, I promise this is the last one, but you have to have the support of the right people. So not just the compliance team, IT as well, products, maybe commercial or sales, whatever, and then secure their sponsorship. I say that those are some of the strategies that have worked in the past. But of course, I'm very much open to hear more contributions from my fellow speakers.
Thank you so much, Korede. Dr. Tunde.
I want to really jump into this, because this is something that is extremely important to me. So obviously, I have a vested interest in getting people to buy into RegTech solutions because that's what we do. I think, and if I may just slightly tweak your question, and I know the question is focused on investors. I do understand that sometimes the compliance people in compliance, I mean, you guys are the superheroes because you are fighting, you understand the expectations from a regulatory perspective, and you are trying to, and you know what you need, but everybody looks at you as a cost center, and you are trying to basically fight for your piece of the pie with respect to budget. And so, yeah, there is part of it where you have to justify to investors. The compliance person might not necessarily be the one that is justifying to investors, but you need to justify to your management team. Because then they are looking at competing line items. They are looking at your line item for your compliance solution vis-a-vis line item for marketing, vis-a-vis line item for payroll, and all of that stuff. So, I mean, it's a challenge that I personally have a lot of conversations with the compliance with our compliance partners. Um, what I will say is there's probably three ways that we approach that conversation. Number one is the fact that if you start from the perspective that there is an obligation that you cannot avoid. There's a regulatory obligation, and you tie the conversation to the existence of the business. If you don't do XYZ, you are putting your license in jeopardy. If you have that as the fundamental basis of the conversation to set the stage, then they know how serious it is. That is the first thing. Number two, what you have to then do is sell the solution, not necessarily as, oh, we need this thing. It is really just what is the return on investment on this? So, for instance, you have a situation where if you don't, I'll give an example. If you have some of the regulations and legislations in Nigeria, there's specific penalties for specific infractions. And one of them, if you talk about STRs, for instance, there's a penalty of 1 million naira per day if you don't flag and report suspicious transactions. And so if you have an organization that maybe does 100,000 transactions a day, by default, you expect that a specific industry-wide, a specific percentage of transactions are generally suspicious. Now, it's not as if they're fraudulent, but they're generally suspicious. Assume that amount is somewhere around 0.2%. So you have a situation where, and my math is really bad now, but assume 100,000 transactions. So maybe 200 transactions every day, you should be suspicious. If you have 100,000 transactions a day, you are not reporting any of them. Across a month, you are then expected to report 6,000 transactions. For each day that you're not reporting those transactions, is a 1 million naira penalty. So assume that even if the regulator was just to slap on 1 day penalty for your 6,000 transactions, that's 1 million naira, that's already 6 billion. So you put that in front of a management team and say, well, we're at risk of a 6 billion naira fine. This solution that I'm asking you to pay for is maybe 6 million naira. I'm pulling out numbers from the air. So the return on investment is almost 1,000%. So you come at it from, because those guys, they understand numbers. They don't really understand big grammar and they understand numbers. So that's the second thing. There's the ROI conversation. And then the third thing is the efficiency conversation. Because a lot of RegTech solutions, there is stuff that is driven around onboarding individuals, transaction monitoring, and the like. But there's also stuff around making people more efficient, making the compliance team more efficient. And so you should have a situation where, for instance, you want to be able to see trends across your compliance lifecycle. You want to be able to see how many customers that you've onboarded that had issues and all of that stuff. But it's very, very difficult for you to be able to do. So what you have to do is to be able to contextualize and properly calculate the time that is taking you to do all of those minor tasks, and once again put it in data. So the overall thing, and I think this also goes to to investors, because ultimately what they need to be, because when an investor puts in money, what they want to do is they want to see a return on capital at some point in the future. Now, if you are saying to them that there is a system, or there are certain things that might jeopardize that return on capital, whether it is risk from a regulator, excuse me, or whether it is even risk from the reputational risk. Because when you get a fine, People are talking about you for months. Say, these people got fined. I mean, there's a particular fintech that got fined a while ago that people still use them as examples. I think it was about 250 million. I won't mention the name, but you know what I'm talking about. Just saying the amount, you know who it is. So it's a reputational risk as well. So yeah, you basically, to kind of summarize the point I'm trying to make, is that you have to be able to contextualize it for them to know that whether it's management team or investors, that this is an existential threat to the organization if it's not done properly because your license is at risk. Number two, you then have to be able to calculate what that spend looks at vis-a-vis return on investment. And number three, push it not only necessarily as just a regulatory compliance thing, but also a compliance efficiency thing, because you are trying to also make sure that you as a compliance team, that you are being as efficient as possible. And then number four, and I know I added number four at the end, is that you need to be able to make it clear that there also is a reputational cost to your organization if these things aren't done properly. Any investor, any management team that sees these arguments properly laid out, well, they will be silly to just disregard it. Now, maybe they will not start to argue with you about how much you should spend on these tools, but they won't argue with you about whether or not you should be spending money on these tools. So for me, this is an argument or the conversation I have with a lot of my compliance partners to help them help them, number one, calculate these things, but also help them position and push the narrative internally so that they can get approval so that they can use my RegTech solution.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Tunde. Kehinde, would you like to add anything? Do you have any contributions? You are muted if you are speaking.
Apologies, I thought I was on mute. So yes, I said thank you, Korede. Thank you today for that. Like they've said, you need to show impact. What I would start with motivating the compliance team in-house. The first thing, what I do is when I see a breach or I see a fine, I send it to my compliance team and show them that this is their contribution. This is the worth of their contribution to the organization. For example, you're seeing somebody a company that was fined $250 million, or that is a huge sum of money. So because the team has to be motivated to do things, and for sales, they see conversions. For marketing, they could see, they could see what the results. Some results are easily seen. But for compliance, it could be like you are just, stopping the business from being profitable, not competitive. Your ask at so much, disturbing everybody. Everybody just wants to get it done and over with. So look for the price of non-compliance. That's the number one thing. Then everybody would be motivated to work, because I would not want my organization to lose 250 million USD. How much have we made as profits in the first place? So I would not want us to do that. And if a client refuses to provide the documents we've asked, I'm going to show them that, the management, this is the risk. If we don't get this, we could be sanctioned, and the sanction could be 250 million. Is the client actually worth 250 million USD? If the client is not worth it, I'm sure your team lead, the manager, is going to say, oh, can we look for how to get it? They would help you get those information from them. And keep records. It is very important that you keep records of what you've done and see impacts in everything you've done. For example, in onboarding, what is the impact of onboarding a client? What is the impact, aside the regulatory requirements? What is the impact? What is the benefit of the document you've collected to the organization? And when you're writing your report, you should show that in your monthly or quarterly report to say that we onboarded 50 clients, 20 were rejected. This is the impact of the rejection. This is the impact of the clients that were onboarded. So show results in everything. See what you do as something that shows results. suspicious transactions. 20 was is it reverted or reversed? 20 if these transactions had gone through, this is the possible risk it could go to, that the company could be involved in. And another thing is, honestly, nobody wants to be the one in trouble. I don't know how many people have sent adverse reports, but when I generate adverse reports and I want to send it, it is so easy for me to send, and I'm clicking and saying, please provide clarification on why you on this and that, what is the remediation process. But I don't want that to come to my organization. I would not want anybody to see my company on the list and adverse media, and you have to keep explaining and explaining and explaining and explaining. And this still comes to management buying. If they don't know what you do, they cannot appreciate what you've done. And if you also do not appreciate what you do, nobody is going to appreciate that. So yeah, to get management buying, track, monitor, show evidence, show results, and also believe that you are contributing massively to the organization.
Thank you so much, Kehinde. To our amazing participants, please, if you have any questions or comments, please use the chat box, drop your questions there, and when we get to the dedicated segment for questions and answers, we'll take your questions. So my next question is, I'll be directing it to Korede and Dr. Tunde. So we know that as part of policy implementation, there are different responsibilities for everyone in the organization, especially for the board and senior management. So how do you ensure that the board and senior management play their role in implementing these policies in the organization?
I think I'm going to let Dr. Tunde speak first.
And there I was thinking, let's go after you. Yeah, so I think so the way I would frame, so once again, I think so for context, I don't work in-house in compliance, so I'm always from the outside looking in. So that is the context within which I'll take my response. So the board, so they have, I mean, firstly, there's obviously the legal stuff, and I know I always go into this legal stuff because everything that underpins broadly compliance, there's always a legal obligation. So, I mean, if you go into, for instance, the Money Laundering Prohibition Act, there's specific obligations around the board and the things that they have to review and approve. So things like AML policies and all of that stuff. And then there's reporting lines that are by law have to exist, where, for instance, the chief compliance officer is meant to report directly to the board. And so there's those responsibilities that are legal responsibilities that the board cannot run away from. Now, you have to understand that in an organization hierarchy, the busiest people are the board, and so they can't really get into the weeds. And so when you look at it from a RegTech perspective, which is the perspective you have to come from, is you have to find a way to very quickly and easily be able to give them the information that they need to be able to perform their responsibilities, their legal responsibilities. And so there's two things around that. Number one is the actual information. One of the things that if you have a solution, you have to be able to have a solution that can help you, for instance, create management reports. Because those are the ways that you can see at the high level what your compliance overview looks like. You want to see what the risks are across all your different, so around the businesses that you've onboarded, the individuals that you've onboarded, the PEPs, sanctions list, all of that stuff. You want to be able to very easily surface that information that you can put into a report. Now, in theory, you could have somebody that is their job every month to be putting all this information in and writing reports and all of that stuff. But in reality, you can have a solution like RegFile that can help you automate all of that that information that you can present to your board and your management team. So that's one thing. The second thing is that you want to have you want to have the ability for them to be able to, for instance, interrogate certain things. If somebody says something around, okay, this is X, Y, you want to have a way for them to, they have, I don't use the word access, but they want to be, if they want to do a deep dive, they should be able to do a deep dive without necessarily having to bring all the compliance officers and everybody into the loop. And so one of the things that you could look for in a solution is something that has maybe access control, where you can potentially provide um, 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 access to a user that they can log onto the back end of your solution for just information, not to see the raw data, but if they want to just say, oh, let me check this information, they have that access. That doesn't affect the day-to-day operations. This person isn't necessarily reviewing flag transactions or reviewing flag accounts, but they can see the data on the back end. Because ultimately, once again, the obligation that they have, you have to be able to find a way to allow them to execute on those obligations in a seamless way. Otherwise, they're not able to do their job properly. So yeah, it's providing those, giving them the ability to have those management reports, and also providing them access to be able to, on their own, interrogate that. I guess at the third level is you could have a situation where you want to be able to remind them of their obligations. So a lot of things, some tools you can have that can set specific reminders. So if, for instance, the AML policy has to be approved every year, you can get notifications that go to the board and say, okay, this is coming up on the 15th of September. Today is the 15th of August, 15th of September, this needs to be updated. So they know that, okay, Corey, who's our head of compliance, is expected to send something to us in the next 2 weeks to say, do you guys approve to this? So they can even follow up and say, Corey, we haven't received this yet. Do we expect this in the next board pack? So those are the things where you provide the tools for them to be able to remind them about their obligations. So I mean, that's from a solution provider perspective. Those are the areas that we would be looking at. Well, I'll now pass the mic to the people that are in the trenches and are doing the actual work.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tunde. Korede, please, you can go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. I really wanted Dr. Tunde to give it from an outside perspective, and then I can. So my understanding of your question is, how do you make people understand their responsibilities when it comes to policy implementation, especially
Yeah,
like people
board and senior man here. You guys already talked.
Okay. So first of all, I think that one of the things that I've seen or that I've experienced is the fact that you can't treat the information, which is why management information that Dr. Tuli mentioned is very important. You can't treat whatever information you're sending to the board and the information you're sending to the senior management as the same. So the board, I don't think they want to be bogged down about the how. They just want to have a high level understanding of why, and maybe financial implications, whatever risks there are, reputational implications. They want assurance. They want tell me exactly what you want from me, and then I will do it. So high level. So I mean that approach is very important. So you can't obviously most AML policies are longer than 10 pages. You can't send board members a 10-page document and say, please find attached that AML policy for your information. Like, are you joking? No one is going to read that. They're busy. Everyone is busy. So which is why just break things down for them. Tell them, hey, these are your responsibilities. These are the risks. This is the high level. This is the picture. This is what we need from you. This is what we expect. We need you to attend certain trainings. This is part of regulatory requirements. And then for the senior management, obviously, they're the ones that delegate the areas of the policy. First of all, I needed to mention that, okay, not first of all, but second of all, that of course the board has the ultimate responsibility. So they know that they are responsible for, I would say, yeah, they're responsible for the success of that policy. So it's very important that they understand, they understand. And usually in most organizations, and I think CBN has that framework where for corporate governance, you have to have a certain, they have to have certain qualifications. If I'm not wrong, I think it's called fit and proper. I'm not sure, but yeah. So they know that when I'm, on the board of a financial institution, I have to be active. I have to attend trainings. I have to sign policies. I have to understand, okay, on a high level, what's the posture of the compliance structure, and then, for the senior management to engage them you basically just, again, yes, they probably will have to read the policies as like the reviewers of the policy or whatever, but again, you have to break these things down. It's very easy to for, again, because they're responsible. I think some of the administrative sanctions of the CBN when it comes to AML, and I really don't want this conversation to be mostly AML based, but one of the administrative sanctions for, I believe, is a lot, some money for the board and also the management, and maybe also the compliance officer. So they know there are consequences. Speak consequences, and let them know that they are the champions. So yeah, that's how I think it has helped. Not think. That's how I've seen it, effectively um, play out in real life. Yeah.
Mhm. Thank you so much, Korede. Kehinde, do you have anything to add briefly?
No, no,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you. So before we take our questions, please, if you have questions, amazing participants, if you have questions, kindly drop them in the chat box. We'll be addressing the questions shortly. So lastly, or maybe second to the last, what are the key features to look for when selecting a RegTech solutions to use in your organization? So I would direct that to Kehinde and Dr. Tunde as well.
Yeah, thank you, Yanu. So, the first thing would be your market. You don't want to use a tool that, for example, you're in Nigeria, the tool does not cover, things like the BVN or NIN. You don't want to use that for your verification of identification, because a lot of people don't, depending on who you are providing your services to. So your clients, people you'd be verifying, your market, your products. So you need to get a tool that aligns with those three, and your budgets, or what, yes, your budget. So you need to get a tool that aligns with your market, your product, your clients, and aside of definitely regulatory provisions, yeah. So, and your products, your clients, your market, the solution. Then you also have to look at reputation of data protection, because you don't want to expose your data to just any provider that is going to put you at risk. And you were able to get the regulators for AML off your back. Now you have data protection to deal with. So you need to look out for what is the data protection regulation, how do they handle data, how would this data be stored. So yes, you need to look out for that. And also, this is additional, you could look out for what additional benefits would you be getting from using these tools,
Mm.
or from using this provider. Some providers offer webinars, some provider offer certifications, and if you had those certification as a compliance person to your CV, it could, but this is only secondary to the first I've listed. You know, if you had those certification, it could show impact. Show that you're not just you are technical. You are the modern day compliance professional. So value added services, it would be a good way. Webinar, certification, information you could get from those providers, and also flexibility and adaptability. You don't want to use a provider that you do not understand how it works. It is so complicated, that you don't know where to start from, you don't know where to end. You have series of trainings to do. So you also have to look out for that. Yeah.
Thank you, Kehinde. Just before I pass the mic to Dr. Tunde, because I know he's a provider, I would like to hear Korede's perspective.
Yes, I was going to say that he's going to say the best things we want to hear, and I love it so much. But one of the things that, in addition to what Kende said, is I would say that first of all, your RegTech provider has to have they have to be adaptive. They have to be adaptive to regulatory changes in that sense. So for instance, you don't every time if you're using a RegTech tool, for instance, you have to make sure that they know that if the CBN drops something, for instance, today, they are ready to implement it tomorrow, or any other regulator in that sense. But another thing that is very critical is, I would say, interoperability. I think that's what they call it. It's a tech thing
Yeah.
where you have to implement, when you can't operate a RegTech solution in silo. First of all, you have to make sure that RegTech solution is able to integrate, what's the word, connect into every system that you're going to into like the entire organizational infrastructure. And I would say it's automation, which basically these days machine learning and artificial intelligence helps, and like the primary driver for most RegTechs. And to add to what Candy said about data protection, and of course on security. You see, that one is very important because you're having an external provider come into your entire data ecosystem. They would have access, they probably would have access to your customer data. They would have access to what, even maybe employee data. And so if you don't have data privacy considerations in when you're looking for a RegTech provider, it's going to be very complicated. You have to know that RegTech provider has, for instance, in Nigeria, they are probably NDPR certified. They go through the proper audits. They are subscribed to the international best practices from a security perspective. They understand that they have risks. They are willing to also share information about their fourth parties, meaning people who also provide services to them. They have to be able to, a couple of things really. And most importantly, you also have to look at how they like Kenya said, handle data, how they transfer data. You have to also look at, and I think the last one, which is very important, is auditability and I would say scalability. And I think one last one is, like Kanye mentioned, flexibility. And I say this because no two organizations are the same. No two organizations are the same. So if an organization wants an AML solution that could track, that could have, simple transaction rules, another organization based on their structure might want complex transaction rules. So if that RegTech solution does not have the feature of being able to, adapt and change and, be flexible enough to make sure that whatever it is they're doing suits that organizational structure or the operational modalities, then you probably should be looking for another tool. But I have encountered RegFail a couple of times, and I think I'm going to let Dr. Tunde speak at this point.
Thank you so much, Korede. So
Yeah.
let's hear from Dr. Tunde.
I mean, this is the best question for me, and I think I should thank Kenny and Corey for basically just talking about RegFile, because everything that they've said is what I mean. So I mean, jokes aside, this is a very very serious thing that we encounter in the industry, and I'm not going to speak specifically like everyone is on my T-shirt, so I'm going to talk about RegFile. There's five important things I think. Number one, and thankfully for the people who, and I'm focused a bit on financial institutions, so I apologize for people who are in the broader space. But for instance, number one on that list is regulatory standards. Thankfully, the Central Bank of Nigeria has released specific standards, even though it's draft, it has the draft baseline standards for automated AML solution providers. And so the number one thing is that if you're engaging anybody, you have to see how do they meet these things that the CBN has requested that any vendor should have. If they don't meet that initial hurdle, then you shouldn't be having that conversation. So that is the first kind of hurdle that you see that they have to clear. That's number one, the regulatory standards. Number two is the actual team behind the solution. In this tech and in this area, in this era of vibe coding, anybody can wake up and say they built a tech solution. The tech, especially in compliance, it's not just technology. It is driven by core regulatory and legal obligations. And whoever it is that is saying that they are your provider, they need to understand the underlying obligations and stuff that is driving that need. And so very quickly, whether it's in a demo, whether it's an engagement, you should be able to suss out whether the team that you're working with know what they're talking about and can understand the underlying obligations that this tool is supposed to be able to drive. If you can't tick that box, if they can't hold a conversation with you about what it is that you're trying to do, then you shouldn't, that's not your vendor. That person is just selling you APIs or just selling you a tool that is not going to solve your issue. So that's number two, understanding that the team behind the solution have the requisite capacity to be able to understand your challenges. Number three is the actual the way that they support. So a lot of solution providers out there, because I've been in the industry for a while, they will come, they will sell you a solution, promise heaven on earth, and the moment they sign and they collect your money, they're gone. And so support is a very, very important thing. You can have all the fancy stuff, especially in a place like Nigeria, where, and this isn't a knock on any of the compliance guys, but a lot of the, especially in fintechs, a lot of these guys are some of the compliance officers and compliance, they are new to some of these solutions, and so the learning curve in how to get up to speed with the solutions on a day-to-day basis might not necessarily be there in some of these institutions. And so there's a bit of hand-holding that is required. Now, if you have a provider that just says, oh, I've given you the APIs, I've given you the information, go and do it, go and check our FAQs, and you're not getting that level of support, then you're not using the solution to its full capability. So support is a very important thing. How do you understand? Because in a sales call, and I do a lot in sales call, I'll promise everything, but at the end of it, I'll say, if you don't believe me, go and speak to X, go and speak to Y. You should be able to then get references. So support is the number three important thing. Number four is the flexibility for the future. And I think Kendi and Corey mentioned it. Compliance is one of the things that's always evolving. Right? Maybe we wake up on Monday, maybe CBN or SEC has release something, or NFI guys release something. How are they able to adapt? So it's not, oh, there's a specific thing that we know is going to change in 6 months. What are you going to do about that change? It is, what is your process for how you would adapt to changes, whatever those changes are. You have to be able to see that they have a structure in place for how they will continue to evolve with the changes that happen in the compliance space. I don't know if that's number three or number four, but the next one is really around your due diligence. So, and I don't mean this is vendor due diligence. And it can kind of overlap some things that Corey and Kendi said, in the sense that these people that you're about to engage with, they are going to get access to a lot of stuff. They're going to have access to a lot of stuff. Now, there is best practice, industry best practice, for if someone wants to get access to those things, what they should have done to get their house in order. And so there's a checklist, so maybe, you mentioned data privacy, and the number one, by default, if a vendor comes to you and say they are not registered with the Nigerian Data Protection Commission as a data processor of major importance, if they don't have that, don't engage with them. That is a basic thing that they should have. Another basic thing that they should have is they should have their business continuity policy. Hopefully they have that, some type of ISO certification. These are all things that you would be able to interrogate as part of the vendor due diligence process. So those are the things that, if you're choosing a vendor, that you should be able to be mindful of. And if you want me to take it again, because I have a short note here, I was making notes there. Number one is making sure that they are aligned with the regulatory standards. I use the CBN as an example.
Yeah.
Number two, you want to make sure that the team behind the solution understand what your processes are, what the obligations are. Number three, you want to make sure that that support structure is there, and you can evidence and reference that. Number four, you want to make sure of their adaptability to the future changes, not just specific changes, but how they adapt to future. And number five, and finally, is that you have to be able to make sure that when you do your vendor due diligence, the things that are important as a technology solution vendor, they're able to tick those boxes. So that's my response. And maybe I'll just plug at the bottom.
Thank you so much. All right, go ahead, please.
I was just going to say that, so maybe have a chat with Regfile as well. Maybe we meet all of these 5 things. Maybe we don't. You can speak to us to find out.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Thank you so much, Korede, and thank you so much, Kendi. So we have 2 questions here, but we already addressed one when I was asking some questions about how do you handle implementation and monitoring when these are not applicable to those at the top. I would like to say that first, policy applies to everyone in an organization, whether you're at the top or whether you're at the, in quotes, bottom. policy applies to everyone. And I think we already addressed that when I was asking about how do you ensure the board and senior management implement these policies as well. Okay, so we have another question here. How possible is it for RegTech to draft an ESG policy, implementation and monitoring for companies in the maritime, shipping, and haulage industry? You already mentioned the financial sector. Does the solution provide updates on international policies as well? Should I take the question again? Okay, so the question reads, how possible is it for RegTech to draft an ESG policy implementation? Okay, how possible is it for RegTech to draft an ESG policy and also implement and monitor policies for companies in the maritime industry?
I mean,
Does anybody?
yeah, I can take that. I mean, how
Okay.
easy it can be done. Now, the question is whether it can be done effectively. So I mean, you can put it the vendor, the solutions. It doesn't even have to be a specific RegTech solution. There's a lot of like AI things out there that you can specifically feed in data. So I'll give an example. If, for instance, you were to go on, and this isn't me suggesting that this is what you do. The question is a hypothetical. Can it be done? Yes. So you can go into whether it's Claude, whether it's ChatGPT, and you put the underlying, you upload the documentation that has the underlying obligations, and then you do the right prompts and to explain what it is that you're trying to get. You put context, and I think it's important that you use context. And if you're using AI, you always use context. This is the organization that I support. These are our policies. This is our license. This is what we're trying to implement. This is the team size, all of that stuff. And you put it in, and then it creates a document and it creates that. Now, the key thing is that it will create something. But if you don't know what it is that you want it to create, and if you haven't seen it before and you don't know what it should look like, you just take it as, this is fantastic. It was done in 5 seconds. But the reality is that the work of AI is to present to you what I call first principles. It provides you what it looks like, what it should look like. It thinks that it should look like, but then it's your responsibility to then review and then tweak certain things and then update it and then say, okay, maybe improve the prompt and say, actually, I want it for this or that. So yeah, it can do it from creating the policies and creating the how you would implement it. Now, but you shouldn't always, I mean, you have to, that's why you need expertise. It shouldn't be a random person that does it, someone that knows what they're looking out for. Now, linked to that is then how, and this is where the tool itself, if a RegTech tool comes in. If you have then created a policy and you've created how you want to track it, you know who the responsible individuals are. You know what the expectations are. Depending on the flexibility of your regulatory tool, your RegTech tool, you can be able to, for instance, tag responsible individuals. You are able to, for instance, set up recurring deadlines. You're able to, for instance, if you are plugged into specific data points, you can be able to pull metrics that you can use to then report all of these things. Beg pardon?
I was saying if you could summarize.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I have been known to talk a lot, so I'm sorry. In theory, it is possible, but in practice, that you should be very, very wary about how you do it, and it should only be handled with care.
All right, thank you so much. I know we're already running out of time, but let's take this last question. I think we addressed a part of it when you were speaking earlier to our speakers. So the question goes to us, what's the place of AI agents in the compliance lifecycle of an organization?
I'm going to let Dr. Tune take this one because, of course, it's his expertise. But I wanted to just add something to what he said regarding the use of generative AI. So, first of all, you shouldn't put your organization, of course, this is common knowledge, but you shouldn't put your organization data in an unapproved, internally unapproved generative AI system, even if you're trying to develop a policy, just because, again, just because. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Cordy.
Yeah,
So,
thanks for that important clarification. I mean, it goes without saying, but I mean, sometimes you have to say it. I mean, I'll try and keep the answer brief. AI agents play a big role. I think for me, the way that we look at the way that compliance and technology is evolving, AI agents will continue to play a big role. I think I mean, in a nutshell, like for instance, the way that we, for instance, use AI agents is there is a task. There's a specific task that needs to be done. For the AI agent to work effectively is you need to give it its standard operating procedure, but that standard operating procedure must have been created by you. So you have a structure that you've created. What you just want to do is then layer the AI agents on top to be able to do it at scale and do it effectively. So it does have its place. It has its place in, for instance, and I give examples on our system. We don't call it AI agents like that, but we already implemented. I give an example around your suspicious transaction reporting and how you are able to generate those reports. You can have it on how you flag when you flag a case. How do you review those cases? There are different use cases that you can have. But at the core of it, first step is that you have to have your SOPs that you're going to layer the AI agents on top of. And we're going to start to see more and more solutions that are implementing those things in the future. So it's going to be an exciting space in the next few months to years.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tunde. Thank you so much, Korede, and thank you so much, Kehinde, and to amazing participants. Thank you all for joining. I think that brings us to the end of the webinar session. This webinar was in partnership with Stocks. So I would allow Kehinde to give the vote of thanks. Kehinde, you have the floor.
Thank you, Yanu. So before we go, I'll just say if there are free tools you've used that worked, you could drop it in the chat so that people could explore and think. I use Know Your Country. It gives a good overview of country risk for each country, like a very detailed, and it's free for at least the first view. So is a very good source of information with links, verified links from the sources, from their sources anyways. So I use Know Your Countries. There are a lot of free tools you could use. So if there are any, just drop it in the chat so everybody could benefit from that. And yeah, I would like to say thank you, Regcompass. Thank you, Dr. Tunde. Thank you, Korede. Thank you, everyone, for attending this section. If you have any questions or concerns or anything you need help with, you could, we have Reg File, Dr. Tunde, we have Regcompass to assist you with that. I'm sure they would do a great job on that, and I'm sure Korede is she's a very good authority in this field. So, yes. And yeah, we also have myself for clarification and any concerns you may have for implementing policies. And it could sound overwhelming, but start from somewhere and build from it. So thank you guys for attending the webinar.
Thank you so much, and we apologize for running over time by 4 minutes. Thank you all, and enjoy the rest of your day. To our speakers, thank you so much once again. Have a great day. Bye, everyone.
Bye.